But even with those plot holes, there were a couple of things that I would have liked to seen a lot more of. For instance, there's that village full of women who have disfigured themselves so they could escape the queen, which I thought was actually really clever. I mean, sure, they didn't disfigure themselves too much, but it was the concept to it was actually pretty darn good. And the other thing was the so-called Dark Army. I would have liked to have seen so much more of those guys. It's not even funny. I mean, they have them in the beginning and the end, but I would have liked to have them as the actual main force of the queen. I mean, sure, maybe a couple of actual soldiers to be her minions, but considering this is all fantasy and stuff like that, it would make more sense, at least from my point of view, and maybe even a little darker if they had these actual creatures, I think is the way to call them, as the main force that the queen has against Snow White and her companions. Now, Kristen Stewart was being Kristen Stewart, just as Snow White, but deep down she was really just ordinary Kristen Stewart. Although I will have to admit that as far as blocking or all-around body movement, she was actually a lot better. But it didn't help on the fact that her acting still was pretty bad. Because, you know, her normal facial expression or closest thing to emotion is this. I mean, sure, she has a couple of decent emotions, like a nice smile or something like that, but on the whole, it's just Bella Swan the way we know her. As for the character herself, I thought she was interesting. If she was much more carefully developed and had a better actress, she probably would have been a really, really good character. Just maybe. Now, Chris Hemsworth as the Huntsman. I didn't like how he started off, you know, being this whole drunk, starting off as a drunk guy who's totally drunk and getting beaten up by other guys before he's called off to his mission or something like that, because, you know, that's been done plenty of times. But I have to admit, the whole he's actually a widower, that actually was a nice that was actually a nice thing to put about the character. As for acting, I'd like to say he was mostly just being Thor, which, in terms of being a bad A with the action scenes and with, you know, everyone who loves him in Thor, or like me, is fine. But I would have liked to have seen him a little different, considering this is a totally different character than who Thor is. Because the only difference is that he has two axes instead of Mjolnir, and he's not a Norse god, and he has blonde hair. Other than that, he's pretty much the same guy. So I still like him, and he was still pretty cool. But I feel he could have done a bit better in terms of showing he is a totally different character than who he is in the Avengers and Thor. As for the Queen, she was alright. I will admit she was a pretty decent villain. Not the most completely developed. I mean, yes, she did have her flashback, which was rather nice, but all in a whole, she was just alright. Not horrible, but she was nice. The one issue I do have was that she did shout a lot in very unnecessary times, so yeah. Now the dwarves, I would have liked to seen a lot more of them. I mean, yes, it goes without saying that they're no match for the 7 dwarves in the Disney film, but still, they were fun. I heard the audience chuckle quite a few times because of these characters. I did like that they had a couple of familiar faces like Ian McShane or Nick Frost. I guess the other really big issue is that there were 8 dwarves instead of 7, which I'm like, why does it need to be that way? Now, the music I thought was good, but I feel that when the soldiers attacked that village full of disfigured women, the song that was playing for that didn't seem to work. I mean, granted, I only saw the movie once, so I do not fully know how the song goes, but I do remember that there was a part of me who thought that it didn't seem to work what music was playing in that scene, but I could be completely wrong. The editing was pretty good, but there were a couple of issues that I didn't like. I mean, firstly, and this is probably one of these things that Twilight haters will probably really love on how just silly it is. But when Snow White goes into the dark forest, really cheesy name by the way, she's all scared and all that, and you know there's a bunch of cuts where she's going and all of a sudden there's one scene where she's just, so the whole time it's going me, mommy! Just like that. I mean, if you hate Twilight, I recommend going to see this movie just to see that scene so you could just laugh your butt off at how silly that is. And then there's a very short scene where the Queen comes back injured after trying to foil Snow White from trying to stop her, but the whole time she is just crawling into the mirror, all bloody and totally injured and all that, which is pretty cool because she transforms into a total flock of ravens, and since William and the Huntsman kill a few, she ends up being really injured when she transforms back into her castle. But when you think of the general purpose to the scene, it kind of really has none. I mean, really, it's just the gory injury, blood and gore stuff that's interesting. After that, it has no point. I mean, she's just crawling to the mirror, and the mirror's just standing there, and then it just moves to a completely different scene. So when you think on how it didn't really have much motivation outside of just showing the interesting blood and gore of her being injured, considering she transforms into a flock of ravens and all that, it really didn't have a purpose. And that's my review for Snow White and the Huntsman. If you want to see an kind of movie with a decent set of action and story and characters, but some really nice effects and design, then I would recommend that you just check out this movie. Otherwise, it's just not that swell of a movie that has Thor and Bella Swan and a fair collection of plot holes and things like that. So altogether, I give this a 50% out of 100. So if you want to see some more video reviews, I have a couple in my channel right now. But if you want to see actual reviews written all around, just log on into my site at hacksreviews.blogspot.com, where I have over 250 reviews for you to read and enjoy. Until then, everyone, I am Hack. And if you want to know what that stands for and what in the world it has to do with my intro, feel free to ask me.